As it turned out, in 1970, I was playing in a game on Halloween, and on a kickoff, we were playing in a game against Columbia University. When I tackled the ball carrier, I broke my neck and severely damaged my spinal cord. And as a result, I'm almost totally paralyzed below my shoulders. I'm a quadriplegic, and I also lost all sensation a few inches below my shoulders. So I only have sensation a few inches below my shoulders and up.
Welcome in to Menfolk Journeys, the podcast of great conversations with men. I'm your host, Chris Foster, and we're going to explore how we wear this beautiful and confusing mantle of manhood in the 21st century. Look, I get it. In public life, a lot of men are knuckleheads. But in private life, we can be thoughtful and we can be reflective if we have the right conversation, if we feel comfortable talking about our story. And we all have a great story to tell. And we can all learn from those stories. We can learn about who we've been, who we are, and who we want to be. And that's why we're going to have this conversation, so we can learn from other men just like us. And today we're going to have a conversation with my new friend Ken. He is an unbelievable inspiration about what somebody can do after something dramatic happens. How his mind became something more than it was before and led him to lead an incredibly rich and beautiful life. It's an extraordinary conversation with a titan of a man. I hope you enjoy it. Welcome in to Menfolk Journeys. Well, Ken Kunkin, welcome in.
Thank you. Thank you for having me as your guest.
Well, I appreciate it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, my name is Ken Kunkin. I'm now 75 years old. I live in Rockville Center on Long Island in New York State. And I actually grew up in the next town to where I live now in Oceanside.
That's wonderful. I love it that you are full circle life at 75, kind of right next to the same town that you grew up in. So I've got so many questions I want to ask you. But firstly, I want to ask about community. It seems to me right off the bat that because you live in the town that you grew up in, that there's a real connectedness that you have with not just your family, but also the community around you. Do you feel that way because you've been there your whole life?
Oh, absolutely. And I know some of my childhood friends are still in the area. My aunt lives within walking distance of me, as does one of my cousins. And I know we're going to get into the fact that I have children. Well, they went to the same high school that I graduated from.
I love that, and there's this, to me, especially in 2025, Ken, it seems that it's easy for families to physically splinter up and go different places. I myself grew up in Pittsburgh. I now live in Southern California in San Diego. My brother lives in Philadelphia. My dad is in Pittsburgh. My mom is in DC. So our whole family, although, they divorced when I was young, our whole family has gone to various different places of the country. And in my family growing up, that was not uncommon. So I had cousins who grew up in New Hampshire and poof, off to San Francisco, off to New York, off to Colorado, or like off to these various places. I think for you to have generations within the same community not only is rare, but man, that's really special. It must be extremely comforting to you and your entire family.
It's great. I mean, we've all stayed really close. In fact, my sister and her husband just moved about a mile away from me here in Rockville Center, which is really great. But one of the reasons why I live here is so that I would stay close to my family.
Sure. I think that people need that more than they believe. I think that the challenges that life goes through, that you go through in life, and the struggles that everyone has, having a built-in support network, I have to imagine, has been invaluable for you in the course of your life.
Absolutely, Chris. There's very little I could have done with my life without a lot of family help and support. And everything that I was able to do and accomplish in my life, I owe to them.
It's so funny you say that. I know there was a cliche and a big political kerfluffle of Hillary Clinton's phrase, "It takes a village." Despite all the political gobbledygook, which we don't need to talk about, the idea of a village life, the idea of smaller connected families growing up together, I just can't help but think that that's good for people.
I think it's great. I believe very strongly in that. My family has always been my support system, as well as my best friends. And everything I do basically centers around family.
Well, that is a blessing, Ken. That is a rare blessing. So I do want to talk about that. Let's go into that with your childhood. So your family's been around you. What was it like growing up in the neighborhood with your family?
Well, I think there's some things about my background that you don't know. One of them is I was born in 1950, and that was during the polio epidemic.
Wow.
Unfortunately, shortly after I was born, my mother and brother both contracted polio. Now, fortunately, my brother's was a mild case. He totally recovered and became a terrific athlete. But unfortunately, my mother's condition got worse, and she died when I was less than 1 month old.
Wow. So I guess I have to ask, who stepped in to be the mother role?
Well, what happened is my father, brother, and I, my brother was only 2 years old at the time, we moved in with my grandparents, my father's parents, who lived in Limbrook, Long Island, not that far from where we were living at the time. And we lived with my grandparents for the first 4 years of my life before my father remarried.
So talk to me about that, living with grandparents. It's a rare and special thing to see the parent of your parent, right? Because you see your mom and dad, right? You see your dad, you see your dad, right? And you get to know him, but then you realize, oh, your dad actually was a son.
Well, Chris, let me tell you about that. As I told you, my mother died when I was less than a month old. So while we moved in with my father's parents, my mother's parents visited us virtually every day.
Of course.
So I called both sets of my grandmothers, mom, and my grandfather's pop. So my father's mother was Limbrook mom because she lived in Limbrook, and her husband was Limbrook pop. And then my mother's parents, well, since they were additional grandparents, they were more mom and more pop. And I grew up really, really close to them. They became such an integral, important part of my life that a lot of what I've been able to do in my life, I owe to them.
So I have to, this is more of a statement rather than a question, but I have to assume it, Ken, that this growing up, it was just a cradle of love.
Very much so. You know, when I look at my early life growing up, I look back with very fond memories. Mm-hmm. I had a terrific early upbringing that involved not just being close with my grandparents, but aunts, uncles, and cousins as well.
Yeah, I can't imagine, in the right family structure, with the tragedy of your mom passing so early that you never knew her, that your whole family would rally and say, okay, how are we going to help this family? How are we going to dive in and show that, yes, it's tragic, but how can we bring as much love as we can to these young boys growing up?
And they sure did. I was never short of love in my family. I always knew where I could turn, and they never once let me down. They were always there for me.
So I have to believe, Ken, that provided an enormous amount of internal strength and support that you might not have even been aware of, that you just assumed that family was loving and supportive.
Very much so. And mine even more so. Just to tell you a little bit more about my upbringing, my father remarried when I was 4, but unfortunately it was not a very happy marriage. and that ended in divorce. At which point, for a while, we lived with my grandparents again, and then along with my father, my brother, and I have a younger sister through my father's second marriage, who's 10 years younger than I am. So we were very much dependent on, obviously, not just my father, but my grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and on each other, my brother and sister, with everything that we did.
That's marvelous. I love that sense of support. And, I think that it is actually seems to be a through line from the impression I have from you in reading about your life, that you are accustomed to not only building in community support, but embracing it. So as you went through college, you went to Cornell, went to the football team. There must have been that same familial camaraderie, supportive network within a football team. Now, my football experience is a fraction of yours. I played in middle school, right? And you get a sense of the teamwork. I was on a swim team, which is a little bit different because there's a personal goal, but you're part of a team. But it's not as integrated as football. Did you feel like when you went into that football environment, especially in high school, I'm sure you played, that they were also familial?
Oh, very much so. I mean, they became some of my best friends. And at college, I not only played football, but I was a member of a fraternity. So between my fraternity brothers and my football teammates, I had a great group of friends that I was constantly with, either out on the football field or at home in my fraternity where I lived.
Sure. And so that sense of community goes from blood family and community family to a different kind of family, right? As a young boy. Talk to me about what that meant when you're in high school and college, you're on that cusp of adulthood as a young boy, figuring out being a man and what that looks and feels like. How important and what did you learn from your football friends as you kind of all went into this young adulthood together?
Well, I learned about, one, working hard to achieve a goal, but two, teamwork, that we depended on each other, in order to be able to perform appropriately on the football field. But I also had a brother and a sister that I grew up so close with that the importance of family and being with a close group of people that you could confide in, feel safe around, do fun things with, as well as go to seek for advice and support. It made all the difference in my upbringing.
Yeah, I'm sure it did. And then, a lot of the book and what you talk about on your website, Ken, is that when you did play football, you had a moment of injury, like significant and life-changing. Can you talk us through that? Is that okay?
Sure. Well, it happened when I was 20 years old. It was the beginning of my junior year, and I was playing on Cornell's lightweight football team. I'm smaller than most of the heavyweights. I'm just under 5'8" tall. I weighed about 150 at the time, and we had a special league that Cornell was a part of called the 150-pound team, where you had to weigh 154 or less 2 days before the game. And what happened was a lot of my teammates actually weighed more than that, would lose weight to make the weigh-in and then gain weight again in those next days. So even on that team, I was one of the smaller players. But I always grew up being very physically active. In high school, I was also on the wrestling team as well as the football team. And I worked during the summer as a lifeguard.
And you had to learn how to make weight as a wrestler. That helped you in football.
Sure did. So everything I did involved around sports. And my teammates always were some of my best friends that I could not only do things with, but socialize with and confide in. Yeah. And just putting on a uniform made me feel just as part of a select group. And it was great.
Yeah, that is such an interesting insight that I hadn't actually thought about, Ken, where, the purpose of the uniform, of course, as a spectator, you get to see people as numbers and it looks great and you understand that. But, I never really thought about it, just what you mentioned as a player, that when you put a uniform on, physically just from the materials that you're wearing and the clothing that you're wearing, you are unified with your teammates.
Exactly. I mean, they became like your brothers,
Yeah.
and we worked together as a team. And once I had my uniform on, it made me feel tougher and stronger and even more invincible when I went
Right.
out there to compete.
Sure, of course it did. So, so you did play one day and you had an injury.
Right. As it turned out, the play that you're talking about, the injury, occurred on October 31st, 1970,
Hmm.
Halloween Day.
Hmm.
Now, growing up, Halloween was my favorite day of the year. I mean, what could be better than going out trick or treating
Sure.
and getting all the candy and chocolate that you could possibly want that could last you for weeks on end? So I always looked forward to Halloween. As it turned out, in 1970, I was playing in a game on Halloween, uh, and on a kickoff, we were playing in a game against Columbia University. When I tackled the ball carrier, I broke my neck and severely damaged my spinal cord. And as a result, I'm almost totally paralyzed below my shoulders. I'm a quadriplegic, and I also lost all sensation a few inches below my shoulders. So I only have sensation a few inches below my shoulders and up. I have no feeling on the rest of my body. And I have just a little bit of movement in my left arm, although nothing in my fingers or wrist. And on the right side of my body, I could just shrug my shoulder a bit. So Halloween became quickly my worst day of the year
Yeah.
as opposed to my best day.
That is astonishing. It's an amazing, and you know, I maybe it's not a fair thing to say tragic because of what you've done with your life, which is so incredible. And I've got so many questions about how you went through that. So from reading about you, you got through and completed your degree, went on to complete other degrees, became assistant DA, tons of awards. So it's incredible, and I want to get into that. But the one thing first that I'd love to ask, and of course you wrote a book about your experiences. I dream of things that never were, which is incredible, and congratulations on the book. So I have a question for you, Ken. Why the title? What does I dream
Okay.
of things that never were mean to you?
Well, 6 months after my injury, I was asked to testify before a United States Health Subcommittee chaired by Senator Edward Kennedy.
Wow.
And 8 days after my testimony, Senator Kennedy sent me a glass paperweight in the mail that had an inscription on it that the senator said his late brother Robert Kennedy liked very much. And it was the words on that inscription have always been very meaningful to me. The inscription read, "Some men see things as they are and say why. I dream of things that never were and say why not." And that's where I got the title of my book, I Dream of Things That Never Were, the Ken Kunkin story.
I love it. I love it. So I'd like to walk back to that moment, 6 months after you're meeting Senator Kennedy. What's going through your mind in terms of a sense of resilience and recovery, and how to say and how you're going to live the rest of your life?
I was fortunate, as I indicated, that I had a lot of help from my family. They were very supportive and encouraging. But at that time in 1970, 71, I didn't have any role models that had a spinal cord injury. I mean, this was well before the internet, and I didn't hear of anybody else with a spinal cord injury that seemed to be doing something productive with their lives. I mean, Christopher Reeve became a tremendous role model for all of us, but he was injured about 25 years after I was hurt.
Right.
There was a woman named Brooke Ellison, became a tremendous role model, was the first quadriplegic to ever graduate from Harvard University. And she went on to become a teacher at Stony Brook University. She wasn't even born till about a month before my injury.
Wow.
So there weren't many people that I could look to back then for encouragement. When I was in the rehab facility, most of the people that I met there didn't seem to be doing much with their lives. I mean, the attitude back then seemed to be, well, they're paralyzed, they have a disability. How could they be expected to do anything? Now, you have to keep in mind, Chris, this was about 20 years before the Americans with Disabilities Act took effect.
Mm-hmm.
And very few facilities were wheelchair accessible.
Wow.
So it was rare when you'd go out in public that you'd see somebody in a wheelchair because they couldn't get around. There were no curb cuts or ramps. Most buildings had steps. And you certainly didn't see somebody who had no use of their arms and was using an electric wheelchair out in public. You couldn't get around. So I didn't really see people out in public who were in a similar condition than me. And in fact, the people that I met in the rehab facility who didn't seem to be doing much with their lives all had more movement than I had. I had less movement than they did. And again, I don't fault them for not doing much. It seemed like the medical professionals and other professionals that they came in contact with were not encouraging them to do more with their lives. You know, I always thought that people's performance often rises and falls based upon what others expect of them. And there seemed to be very little expectations or hope for somebody who had a significant disability. It was more like, well, you have a disability, accept it, you know, and there didn't seem to be much hope for going out and doing something productive. So when I saw all of these people who were hurt longer than I was and had more movement than I was, it didn't seem like I was going to have much of a future doing anything productive.
Wow. So I guess, so you're 20, right, at the time. Where did you make a change in your mind, or maybe there wasn't a change, or how did you recognize that you were going to move from a place of what you could spiral down into giving up and saying, yes, I guess I'll be one of the folks who aren't productive, and instead you decided to be productive?
Well, again, I have to give all the credit to my family and friends, and I could not have been more depressed than I was at this time.
Of course.
I mean, everything just looked so hopeful, hopeless. I mean,
Yeah.
hopeless and so dismal. But Chris, before my injury, I was very motivated. I mean, you don't go to Cornell, study engineering, and play a sport at the same time and not be highly motivated. What I had to work really hard to do was to try and stay motivated despite my injury. And again, it was my family that kept encouraging me that, well, I still had my mind. I still had my intellectual ability.
Right.
And they believed there was a lot I could do just by using my mind.
I think that is beautiful. Truly, a place of beauty where the capabilities of the human being isn't dictated by other people. Your capabilities are determined by you.
Absolutely.
And I think that for, that through line of, like I said earlier in our conversation, like you were born into this cradle of love from the tragedy of your mom. And it's almost like this cradle of love soaked you with energy and positivity and belief that, like you said, a mind is a very powerful thing. You can do a lot with a mind.
Absolutely. And Chris, I have to say, there were a lot of times when I doubted in myself and whether I would be able to do something.
Of course.
My family kept me motivated. They kept reassuring me that they believed in me and knew there was a lot I could still do. And it got to the point that they were doing so much to help me that I felt I'd be letting them down if I didn't work hard. In fact, they basically assured me that they would act as my arms and legs if need be to make sure I could still do everything I wanted to do in life. And thanks to them, I have been doing that.
That's exactly what we were talking about in the beginning, right? This idea of unconditional love, unconditional support, a family and a community that says, okay, you are of us, we are of you, and we can help you get through this time because, man, most of the times you can't do it on your own, right?
Right. And when I was growing up, I knew just one other person who was in a wheelchair. That happened to be my Aunt Carol, one of my father's sisters. And she unfortunately contracted multiple sclerosis. And I used to watch my grandmother, my father's mother, come on basically a daily basis to help with her care. And I saw, one, the importance of family and how much people can do for each other to help them have a pleasant, useful, productive life.
Mm-hmm.
And those were my role models, to watch that in action, to see the family support, and to see how everybody was working together to help each other.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting because that compensates for like a quote unquote role model, like a Christopher Reeve role model, but you had an aunt, but it wasn't necessarily your aunt that was the model. It was the model of caretaking for your aunt.
My grandmother, correct. And after I was injured, my father's other sister, Lorraine, became such an important role model and helped in my life. She was like another mother to me who took over and helped in every way possible to make sure I could do what I wanted. But also I had grandparents, grandfathers who became role models and worked so hard to show me what you can do with your mind, and how you can be productive and advance. And, my mother's father in particular, who we called more Pop, he was, he had actually was born in Russia, came here at an early age, ended up going to Yale as a young kid, graduated, and went back at the age of 65 to get a master's degree from Columbia University because he loved learning. And that type of person was quite a role model for me as well, to see what he's.
Yeah, it seems to me that your family really prides itself on. And it seems to me, and tell me if I'm off base, please. But they pride themselves on intellectual fortitude.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm gonna come to a brand new country from Russia, and then I'm gonna end up going to the most prestigious university on the planet. Right. I'm going to go late in life to further my education. That maybe that's where they said, look, Ken, this is tough, terrible that your body does not function the way you're going to want to, but your mind is still yours. And this family's got a good mind, right? This family has the practice of mindfulness and the practice of intellectual fortitude. Is that the message they were telling you?
It sure was. And in some ways, it was almost 180 degrees from how I thought of myself. I mean, I was always physically active. I was playing a sport basically 365 days a year. I mean, I was on the football team in high school. I was on the wrestling team in high school. I was on 3 different softball leagues.
Wow.
I worked in the summer as a lifeguard. And it reminds me, about 30 years ago or so, I was asked to speak at a special education PTA meeting because they thought maybe I could be a little bit of a role model to some of the parents who were dealing with, children who had special needs.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, I went to one of their meetings and somebody asked me to describe myself before my injury, what I was like. And I remember telling them, I played football, I wrestled, I played baseball, I was a lifeguard, and I was actually a pretty good student as well. And that was kind of like the afterthought. I thought of myself totally as an athlete first and a good student second. And it was quite an adjustment after my injury to say, one side of my growing up and background of being physically active will have to take second place now, or third or fourth place, to now relying on my mind and doing an intellectual pursuit. And that has been quite a big difficult adjustment. But that's the way I had to train myself to think now about myself.
We'll be right back. Yeah, that's such an interesting choice of words you just said. You had to train yourself how to think. As an athlete, especially in wrestling, there's a lot of really tight, close it's physically intimate, right? The sport is, right?
Right.
It's a sport of inches in terms of body position and movement. Um, in football, there is so much practice with plays and with understanding, taking 5 paces left and then turning at this angle to get the pass, with the formation of how you do defense and offense and the practice and the routine of all of this stuff. For you now, you had to go through an intellectual practice.
Quite a change. And I might add that at that time, even though I was very physically active, I was on the football team, I was a member of a fraternity, I had a lot of good friends, I would also consider myself a bit of an introvert. Cornell had these big classes, these big lectures. I would try very hard. Each time I would go in to sit in the very back and hope nobody noticed me, and never raise my hand in one of those classes. And suddenly now I had to rely on my voice and to be more upfront and to talk. I used to be way too shy to even approach people. Certainly girls, I would never approach. I was just too shy. And here I was now, usually sitting in the front of the class because a lot of the classes were on tiers, and I couldn't sit other than the front row where everybody basically has to look at me in order to see the professor. And it was so uncomfortable.
Sure.
And then I was surprised that later people started asking me to speak before groups and tell them about what I was going through in my experience. And to suddenly try and become more vocal and more outgoing was a major change for me as well.
Yeah. So I can see that as an introvert, you don't want to be the one everybody looks at. And then suddenly, physically, you're in a chair and everybody's looking at you.
Oh, Chris, I got to tell you, my first year back at Cornell, my room, they converted a dorm room for me, and it was actually right opposite the cafeteria. And I used to eat all my meals, or at least a lot of them, in my dorm room and not go to the cafeteria.
Sure.
But one day, my personal care attendant brought me to the cafeteria, and at the time, I had some special braces and splints where, with a lot of effort, I could actually feed myself with a long fork that was on a swivel. And my arm was held up in a brace because I couldn't even hold it up.
Mm-hmm.
And there were steps to get in the cafeteria, so usually I didn't go there in any event. But I remember one day my aide set me up my splints, and I had to concentrate really hard to get any food near or in my mouth. And it was really difficult. And at one point as I'm eating, I looked up, and everyone in the cafeteria was staring at me, watching me eat. And Chris, I don't mean just a few people. I mean the whole cafeteria. And I became so uncomfortable at that. I ate the rest of my meals in my room that year. It was terrible to be stared at wherever I went.
Yeah, I can see that for anybody, especially for introverts, also especially because of why they're staring at you, because they're and to be that kind of center of attention. I think for an introvert, it's extremely painful. My wife's an introvert. We're open about the discussion. And we go to, parties or social events, and she has what she calls an introvert hangover. When she's around too many people, she's like, oh, I need to decompress. But for her, the idea of, I remember years and years ago, for example, we went to this, goofy, comedy magic dinner theater thing like that, and the guy's up there, and he's a magician comedian, and he says, okay, I need a volunteer from the audience. And he pointed at my wife, and you would have you would have thought she turned into a ghost. She was like, this is the worst thing possible. So I can see, how that'd be really painful and uncomfortable.
Oh, Chris, I have to tell you, I can certainly associate with how your wife was feeling and probably still continues to feel at times. Well, because my injury was so unusual back then and going back to school was so unusual for someone in my condition, I received a lot of publicity. Different newspapers and magazines were doing stories about me. And as a result, wherever I went, I was stared at even more because people naturally stare at somebody that they just read about in a newspaper or magazine. Right. So it made it even worse because people would see me and recognize that they read about me. And wherever I went, I was being stared at. It was so uncomfortable.
Oh, I bet. It's one of these things where, folks are trying to celebrate your fortitude and then what you're doing and pushing ahead and going back to school. And you're like, great, but don't give me more attention. I'm just trying to get through school. Right?
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. So you go to Cornell, and congratulations on your degree. It's an astonishing school. Strange but true, Ken. My brother went to Cornell. So I've been there, right? So I've been to the campus in Ithaca, driving through the cornfields to get there. It's a beautiful place. It's kind of like Hogwarts from Harry Potter, right? With all the big stone buildings and everything.
But you know what, Chris? When I went back to Cornell now, I was in the hospital 9 months and 20 days after my injury. And I went back just 11 days after I got out of the rehab facility.
Wow.
And when I went back in 1971, again, this was well before the Americans with Disabilities Act took effect. And Cornell is on a very hilly terrain.
Mm-hmm.
And there was not one ramp or curb cut on the entire campus. So in addition to its long, cold, snowy winters and getting around in the snow is particularly difficult in a wheelchair, virtually every building had steps in front of it. One of the classes that I took, which met 3 times a week, had 16 steps in front of it. And my dorm room was in a building that had 10 steps to get in. So, Chris, on my first day of classes, I had to be either pulled up or bounced down close to 100 steps just to attend my first day.
Good gracious. So, and again, for someone naturally who doesn't want attention, that causes a lot of attention.
It
right?
Sure does, And, I certainly didn't want to be a burden, but, I wanted to continue my education. And I know it would slow up other students getting in and out of the building, but a lot of them chipped in and would help pull up the wheelchair or guide it as we were going down. And everybody tried to help when they could, and I appreciated that.
Yeah, and so
nobody really knew how to help back then because it was all new to me as well as them.
Yeah,
what to do back at school and how to get around.
That is such an interesting concept where it was new to everybody. And yet at the same time they wanted to help, right? And so I would imagine, and please tell me if this is the case, where the fraternity brothers and the camaraderie and the fraternity and the familial nature of your football team, I have to hope that they rallied, and when they heard that you were coming back, they were like, Ken's coming back to school? Let's go, right? And they came in and they were like, Team Ken.
Did. In fact, let me tell you a bit about that. The cook in my fraternity, who, was great, even visited me when I was in the hospital, insisted that the fraternity brothers bring up the dinner she made for the fraternity every night so that I would have a home-cooked dinner. So every night, 2 different fraternity brothers would come up, visit me, and bring the dinner that the cook cooked for that fraternity. Football teammates would, assist when they could. Classmates obviously assisted when they could. And it was, everybody tried to help when they could. But there were no disability services back then, and people really didn't know what to do to try and help. And I didn't know either. It was the blind leading the blind. And I can tell you, one day, the school administration really tried to be helpful. Good. But they didn't know what to do either. And one day, Yeah.
That is
And what
so.
happened was,
That's hilarious because they're like, "Ken, we want to help. Uh, Ken, how do we help? Does
well,
anyone know
that's
how
what
to
happened.
help?"
Yeah. So, Chris, one day I asked, what would help if they could at least put in a ramp to my dorm so I wouldn't have to go down uh, and up those 10 steps every
Mhm.
time I left the building. And they tried to be nice, but they said, if we were to put in a ramp there, we would have to remove 2 bushes. And we're concerned students might protest if we
What?
removed the bushes. And back then, this was the early 70s, students were protesting about everything. But I know students would never have protested if they knew the ramp was for me. And
Sure.
one day, my second semester back at school, we had a fire drill. Now, of course, when there's a fire drill, everybody has to evacuate the building.
Mhm.
And the next day, a school administrator approached me and asked how I managed during the drill. And I told him that while I was able to get out by having my attendant bounce me down the 10 steps, I felt bad because I know I slowed up the other students exiting. Wouldn't you know, Chris, they built a ramp within a few days of that.
Mhm.
And I knew it wasn't for my convenience, but it was for the other students' safety. But that was still fine with me. I mean, at least now I
Yeah.
had a ramp to use. And Chris, not one student complained about removing the 2 bushes.
Of
In
course.
fact, many of them preferred using the ramp to going up and down the steps. So I
Oh,
think there was a lesson there for a lot of people. But,
absolutely.
you know,
I want to pause real quick on that. I think that what you just said, though, Ken, is so revealing of you and your nature. You said that you felt badly that you were slowing the other students up. Instead of saying that I was so irritated or frustrated or I was scared or I was so mad at the administration, you, in that moment, were actually thinking about other people.
well, Chris, I have to say, I felt extremely fortunate that Cornell tried to accommodate me, converted a lounge in one of the buildings to make it into a dorm room for me. And here I was, the only quadriplegic, obviously, on campus. There was one other student who was a paraplegic who used a wheelchair, who actually had a spinal cord injury a year before I did, while he was a student up at Cornell. But other than him, you never saw a student in a wheelchair up there.
Hmm.
So I felt almost guilty that here the school was going out of their way to make some accommodations for me when they had thousands of other students there. And I was the only one who really needed that type of accommodation. And yet, when they could be helpful, they tried to do it.
Yeah, but I think if that's gracious and very I'm not going to say diplomatic of you to say, it's very kind of you to say that about them. But I think that again, it gets back to your mindset. So we've known each other for 40 minutes. But the sense that I get from you, Ken, is that you actually naturally think of other people. Like you're thinking about how other people are comfortable, how to support other people, how to think of their needs, maybe perhaps even before you think of your own needs. Um, is that something that when you were growing up, that was your natural tendency because you were growing up in a family, and that perhaps you realized that your life is actually not just your life, it's everybody else's in the family? Is that where this is coming from?
Absolutely. And I saw how well our family bonded together to help one, of course, my brother and myself, but then also my aunt who had the multiple sclerosis. And
Mm-hmm.
they were very devoted to helping others whenever they could. And I know after my injury, everybody tried to do their best to help me and really went out of their way to do as much as they could to make sure that I was still comfortable and happy. And it got to the point where I knew I wanted to devote my life to helping others, to pay back. And I wasn't sure what I could do. Here, I needed all the help. How could I help somebody? And while I was up at Cornell, even though I was studying engineering, I took an elective in psychology. And my psychology professor, a person by the name of Dr. James Moss, took an interest in me and encouraged me to pursue a career in counseling and in psychology. And
Mm-hmm.
based on his encouragement, after I graduated from Cornell, I went to graduate school at Cornell, where I studied counseling and student personnel administration. And then to increase my counseling credentials, I went to Columbia University, coincidentally, the school that I was injured playing against. And I earned my second master's degree. This one was in psychological counseling and rehabilitation.
Wow.
And I decided to look for a job in the rehabilitation counseling field so that I could help others. Now, this was 1975, 1976. I had now 3 degrees from Cornell, a bachelor's, a master's from Columbia, and no one would hire me. Here I had 3
Shut the
Ivy League
front
degrees,
door.
2 masters. Everybody felt that I was just too disabled to work. Chris,
Oh my
I was
gosh.
even turned down when I have to volunteer my services.
That's insane. You know, and
Fine.
that maybe it was the 1970s-ish thing, but you know, to me that's crazy, first of all, because to have the intellectual stamina, fortitude, discipline, practice to get degrees from these kind of Ivy level schools is just astonishing. And secondly, I want to think about that word help that you just said, because that's kind of this other through line. It could be that through line of that family help. A quick tangent for you. I'm a big Norse mythology fan, and there's a book called the Edic Saga, which was transcribed in the 1100s in Iceland. And what it was is a transcription of the oral traditions and the stories of Norse mythology, because they don't write anything down, right? So anyway, he transcribed all these things, and he said that in one passage, Odin, the All-Father, the head of the Norse mythology, says, there's the most powerful word on earth for human beings is a magic word, and that magic word is help, because help requires not only giving, but also being open-hearted to receive help, right? You have to be able to receive it. And so you then discovered, despite, people not hiring you, a vocation of saying, I'm going to help people. That's what I'm going to do.
Right. Exactly. And now the question was convincing somebody to give me the chance to do that.
Right.
And I might add, Chris, when I started my second master's at Columbia, I met with my advisor, one of the top people at Columbia, and he told me, despite what they were teaching in rehabilitation counseling, even rehabilitation counselors, would be hesitant to hire me to work because of my disability. This is my advisor telling me that I'm still going to have a problem getting a job, despite what they were teaching. So when I was finally hired, I was hired by an organization on Long Island called Abilities Incorporated, which was part of what was then called the Human Resources Center. It's now called the Viscardi Center, after its founder, Dr. Henry Viscardi Jr. And they hired me to work as a vocational rehabilitation counselor for other individuals who had severe disabilities.
Okay.
And that changed my life. It gave me the opportunity to help others. I might add, virtually everyone had more movement than I had that I was counseling, but I still had the opportunity to help others. And that made a huge difference in my life and made me feel so much better about myself.
Of course, because you had purpose, right? Because you had so much to give and so much to offer, and you have so many intellectual gifts that you've developed, not just from an engineering school, which is crazy, by the way. That's crazy to have a degree in engineering, but then to have so much to do and to have such a light and nowhere to shine, right? But now you had a place to shine, which is marvelous. And it was in Long Island, frickin' Ken, the place you kind of grew up, right?
I was really fortunate. And at the time, I had no idea how I was even going to function in the office. I mean, because this was well before the age of laptop computers, and everything you were basically doing, by hand and writing notes, which I couldn't do. And I couldn't even dial a telephone. That was really difficult for me. So I wasn't sure even how I was going to function in an office. And they showed me how to do it at the Viscardi Center. And it made such a difference in my life. And when I had the opportunity to now help others, instead of just being the recipient of so much help, it increased my self-esteem, my feelings of self-worth, my self-confidence, my financial situation to have an income. It made an enormous difference in my life.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people undervalue the value and importance of work that's meaningful. Like one of the scariest and most awful things is for someone to be unemployed, because humans generally want to be productive, right? It's for a million years we've been trying to be productive in tribes, and in a tribal setting we're trying to help out, right? Oh, you gather firewood, you go get water, you get some berries, right? We need to, as a tribe, we need to be productive. And I think as humans, we all are looking for these places where, how can I contribute? How can I do this? And for you especially, having a sense of innate desire to give, right? Ken, you've got to go to work, bro. I mean, you have to.
Absolutely. And I kept asking myself, here I went back to school. I got 3 Ivy League degrees, 2 master's degrees, and no one would give me a chance to show what I could do. And it was just so frustrating. I kept asking myself, what more do I need to do just to get the chance?
Right.
Just to get an opportunity to show that somebody with a disability could still work and work well. And it was the Viscardi Center that gave me that opportunity.
It's beautiful, and it was I think not a smart move on their side, but I think it was the natural thing for them to do, because I would have hoped at the time they understood what a resource you could be for that center.
They certainly did, because they were geared to helping people with disabilities and helping people with disabilities go out and get jobs. And it made an incredible difference in my life.
Yeah,
and they kept increasing my duties, expanding my role, and it changed the outlook of my life.
Yeah, and then after that, from a professional side, you flourished. You got your law degree and became assistant DA. I mean, you just decided that this was just the start of being able to show and accomplish what you wanted to accomplish. Because I guess I'll ask you, Ken, at that point you were like, well, the limitations of my body actually don't mean anything, because there's no limitations to my intellect.
Yeah, well, let me tell you a little bit about how I decided to go to law school. One of my duties at the Viscardi Center was to speak before groups and organizations concerning non-discrimination and affirmative action for people with disabilities. And after my talks, I would often be asked questions. And while I do my best to answer them, I was always careful to caution the questioners they should really consult with a lawyer about their concerns.
That is awesome.
I guess it didn't take long before I started to think, there's no reason why I couldn't become that lawyer.
Sure.
And, the Viscardi Center increased my self-confidence to the point where I felt, what? I could do that.
Of course.
So, when I left the center, I mean, people were questioning, how do you leave this job where it took you a year to get hired? And at the facility, everything was wheelchair accessible. Everybody was attuned to the needs of people with disabilities to pursue a difficult, uncertain career in law. But Viscardi convinced me I could do it. And it gave me the self-confidence to say there was more I could still do. And as a result, I left and went to law school.
It's astonishing, because what you did at that moment was, this might sound weird, but you left a comfortable situation and you sought out discomfort. You sought out the new challenge. But you built up the confidence and the understanding that you absolutely could tackle this new challenge.
Right. And I might add, at the time, I didn't know of any other quadriplegics that were working as an assistant district attorney. Certainly there weren't any on Long Island. And as a trial attorney, because here I went into court and did trials. So let me tell you a little bit more about that. I was able to complete law school in the standard 3-year time period. I passed the difficult New York State bar exam the first time that I took it.
Congratulations.
And I began my work at the district attorney's office by participating and completing a very intensive 4-week training program where they taught us all aspects of trial techniques from a prosecutor's perspective. And I was so proud and excited to go to court my first day. And I couldn't fit through the swinging doors of the court.
No.
They were too narrow to let me get through in my electric wheelchair. That's how I started.
Oh my God.
And then my first assignment was to our traffic court bureau. Back then, we handled traffic court as well. And it was located on the second floor of a neighboring building. And Chris, I was promoted after just 3 days in traffic court because the elevator was broken and no one knew when it would be fixed. That's how I got my first promotion. Maybe the only time my disability actually worked in my favor.
Right, exactly.
But I have to tell you, when I applied for work at the DA's office, the DA at the time, a person by the name of Dennis Dillon, was a very progressive, forward-thinking district attorney who based his hiring decision on my abilities rather than my disability.
Yeah.
And as a result, he hired me while most firms would have been reluctant to do so. And as a result, I think it took a lot of guts on his part to do it, but he had the self-confidence to make that decision. And as a result, I later went on and worked there for more than 40 years.
40 years.
In fact, I was promoted a number of times where I eventually became one of the deputy bureau chiefs of our county court trial bureau, where I was helped supervise more than 25 other assistant district attorneys.
That's astonishing. And what I really love about that story is, of course, your intellectual fortitude, your courage, your belief in yourself to keep moving on. But, also too, like we talked about at the beginning of our conversation, it kind of does take a village. It takes one or two people to see beyond just maybe, this guy's in a wheelchair. It's like, no, this guy's brilliant. This guy has got such a fantastic mind and outlook that he can really be of asset. And I mean, not to belittle lawyers, but lawyers aren't hauling brick and mortar all day in a courtroom, right? The lawyers are using their mind and their speech to move the client to the place that they want to go and to talk to the judge and the jury and the like. So it's not a physical labor job.
No, that's for sure. But Chris, I might just correct you on one point.
Yeah,
I'm not brilliant. I'm definitely not brilliant.
Well, we'll agree to disagree on that point.
Thank you,
Well, it's an incredible career story, Ken, and also and I appreciate you taking the time. I just want to, to close out where you said at the beginning of our conversation that your sons are going to the high school that you went to. So in addition to managing a career, you also are managing fatherhood. I have to believe the way you have lived your life and the fortitude and the strength, I have to believe your sons are picking up on that lessons for them.
Oh boy, my sons are absolutely incredible. But let me tell you, listeners, a little bit about my children. I got married to my incredible wife, Anna, in 2003. Mm-hmm. At the time, I was already in my 50s. And Anna, who's actually sitting to my right now, just off camera, she's the one that's been giving me drinks during our talk. And in fact, she actually proposed to me. Awesome. I would have been too shy to pop the question.
But well, you're an introvert, so you're naturally shy around girls. Come on.
That's right. And it was Anna who said that when we were getting married, she wanted to have my baby. Now, this really seemed impossible, Chris. I had been paralyzed at the time for more than 30 years. And here I was already in my 50s. But Anna convinced me to try. And we researched various options, including in vitro fertilization. Mm-hmm. We decided to pursue it. And I was present in the delivery room, Chris, on January 24th, 2005, when my wife, Anna, gave birth to triplets.
Wow.
We have 3 incredible sons, Joey, Jimmy, and Timmy. They're now 20 years old, and they're juniors in 3 separate colleges in upstate New York.
That's just so remarkable and so beautiful that, your family gets bigger, like family with a capital F. Like it's incredible that you have these young boys now pulled into the entire familial network that is the family, right? And they're on the cusp of young adulthood now too, right? They're at the same age that you were when you had your accident, and
And Chris, I might say on May 12th this past year, they were the exact same age I was when I had my injury.
wow.
So now they're a few months older than I was when I was hurt. And they are just such incredible young adults, and they're all doing so well. And they are very attuned to helping others. You know, they grew up knowing the importance of giving back and helping others, and they do that every opportunity they can.
Well, to be honest with you, Ken, they've had that as a model of manhood in you, right? Where you have shown them as a man what you can do for others and what you can do for yourself. And I have to believe that you've talked about and instilled in the whole family a sense of fortitude and pride and this belief that you can overcome challenges and struggle. And maybe Nietzsche was right. Maybe what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? I don't know, but I have to believe that they see you as a model of manhood in that way, that they're not going to get that from anybody else.
No, and I've been so fortunate. Well, one, of course, my wife is an incredible woman who's done a remarkable job helping not only me, but raising three young
three
men.
boys in a house, but there's
right. And, she had help from aunts, uncles, cousins, brother, sister, everybody as well. So it does take a village to help and raise a family. But as a result, my children have grown up to be incredible young adults. One of them is studying renewable energy at the State University of New York at Morrisville. One of them is pursuing a dual major at Syracuse, studying communications and public policy and public affairs at Syracuse. He wants to be a journalist. And the third is studying mechanical engineering at my alma mater, Cornell University.
Oh, yeah.
And he started at Cornell 50 years after I graduated there.
That's astonishing, and I have a lot of hope for this next generation. I love Gen Z. I love their mindset. I love the sense that they have that they can actually truly change the world. And it sounds like they're pursuing those aspirations. And it's astonishing to me, Ken, that you have such great hair after raising three boys. I don't know how you did that, but
well, I might add
that's pretty impressive.
They may have been the ones that gave me the gray hair, but
but your hair is fantastic. It looks amazing that you kept it all. So this has been just astonishing, and I'm so grateful that you wanted to spend some time with me and have our yik yak. I do have one question that I ask all my guests before I leave. Who is someone that you know that I don't know, but that I should know?
My wife, Anna, without a doubt, the most incredible person I've ever met. And I might add, she takes care of me full time, which is a lot of work, and raised our three boys as well. Yeah. And just to tell you, for when the boys were born, initially we had a nanny helping out, a few days a week. But there were times when my wife was alone. And just to tell you a little bit about what it was like at feeding time, at dinner, we'd have the three boys sitting in high chairs around the table, and me at that table, and Anna to my right. And Anna would give a bite of food to my son, Joey, and then a bite of food to Jimmy, a bite of food to Timmy, a bite of food to Daddy, and a bite of food for Mommy. And we'd go around the table.
Oh my gosh.
She's incredible. My wife took care of all of us at the same time and did an incredible job doing it, and has helped me every step of the way and made me a very happy person during this time.
Oh, that is fantastic. That's beautiful. And blessings to her and to your boys. Well, Ken, thank you so much. I'm so glad we had this conversation, and I appreciate getting to know you a little bit. And I wish you all the best, and I wish your boys all the best as they move into their first stages of manhood.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. And I might add, my boys have grown up to be such independent kids, but I might add they still speak with each other almost on a daily basis, even though at three separate schools. They know the importance of family. They know the importance of helping others and doing whatever they can to make other people's lives better as well. They're a real team. work together great. And as a result, I think everybody is better because of it.
Yeah, you know what? And well, Ken, mission accomplished, right?
Right.
Mission accomplished. Well done, you, Pop, and well done, Anna, Mom. Mission accomplished.
Thank
All right,
you.
my friend. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris.
Oh my goodness. What a fantastic conversation with Ken. What a remarkable man. Of course, overcoming the unbelievable, accident that paralyzes your body. But beyond that, overcoming all the things you have to overcome after that. Whether it's, getting upstairs, whether it's, eating in the dorm room, whether it's pursuing a career and not having people want to hire you. But he kept on going. He kept on persisting. And it was the quality of his persistence that changed and made his life. And what a full life it is. What a remarkable life. Vocational excellence, pursuit of a meaningful career, raising 3 boys. So, what did we learn from Ken? Well, what I learned from Ken is that you can be the man you want to be. You can. The mind is such an extraordinarily powerful thing that if you have this cradle of love around you and the support of a community and the support of a family and the belief in yourself, you can pretty much, the cliche says, accomplish what you want to accomplish. Have a rich, full, and fulfilling life. It's remarkable. It's inspirational. It makes me believe that I can believe in myself and that I can believe in other people and that they can have the lives that they want or the life that they want to build. Even if it's not exactly how they thought it would go, it can still be rich and purposeful and beautiful. Remarkable. I'm so happy and grateful to have that conversation with him. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you join. Visit menfolkjourneys.com. I'd love to have a conversation with you so you can share your story too. Thanks for listening. Word Bid Philarid.